So, contrary to all the predictions of the surveys, Donald Trump won a decisive victory over Kamala Harris for the US presidential election. Of course, all over the press and the social media, there have been lots of discussions of what this means. At least from the Chinese social media, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of commentaries on what this will mean for China or US-China relations. I think in terms of the Chinese perspective is that Trump will lead to an accelerated breakdown within the US society, because the split in terms of views, in terms of principles, in terms of values, in terms of everything that the US have been debating over is going to be even more intense. And the isolationist policies of the President-elect Trump is going to be more aggressively implemented, such as threatening NATO, withdraw from NATO, or more isolationist toward European countries, traditional allies, even to the point of charging Taiwan and Korea and Japan for so-called troop placements to protect them. On the Taiwan issue, he says that Taiwan should pay 10% of its GDP to the United States for protection. This is really a mafia approach. I think all of these things, including threats of imposing 60% duties on all Chinese-made products and 10 or 20% on products made by others that's imported into the US, we'll see if he actually does it. I wouldn't be surprised if he does, but then be forced to retract very quickly, because the inflationary pressure that will be brought about to the US population is going to be absolutely intense. There's already been significant inflationary pressure in the US over the course of the last several years, and additional inflation brought about by such massive movements in terms of customs duties is going to be devastating for the US population, US economy. Potentially would lead to not only US but a global depression. I've gone through, or I've seen, many presidential elections over the last several decades. I remember the days of John F. Kennedy, the days of statesmen like Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, and the days of Jimmy Carter, who were statesmen. And then look at the US presidential election today, somebody like Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. It's been very sad, the transformation of the US into a country where leaders are no longer statesmen. Some are not even qualified to be politicians. It's very sad. Where is this going to head? One never knows. So far, it doesn't look like it's headed in a positive direction. Will there be changes in the geopolitical sphere? Of course, there's all kinds of projections on that, including the war between Russia and Ukraine will be ended very quickly by a deal made between President Putin and President Trump. And there will be movements in the Middle East because Mr. Trump and his family are known to be very supportive of Netanyahu. And there will be changes, supposedly, in the Korean Peninsula because Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim apparently get along quite well. So potentially we see that Mr. Trump doesn't want wars, doesn't want to have conflict with a number of the countries Mr. Biden has not been very friendly with. But it's going to launch an economic war against not only China but the rest of the world. So we will see whether or not this actually happens. whether or not he can really resolve the issues between Russia and Ukraine, the Korean Peninsula, or in the Middle East, that is certainly something that those who are hoping for a peaceful movement in the world hope to see. But I don't think we can be all that optimistic, because there are strategic objectives to be achieved by President Putin in terms of European security framework. Whether or not that strategic objective will mesh with the new attitude of the American administration toward European security framework will really mesh. We will see about that. However, I think what Mr. Trump's success or winning of the election indicates also is the white liberal mentality or values that had been promoted by the Democratic Party over the last decade or so is really on a downswing in the US. And it might have gone too far to have brought about such resistance from the population, but the conflict is now very, very intense. And the right-wing swing in the US population, coupled with that of the European population, reflects, I think, a dissatisfaction with the liberal free mentality that had been dominating the Western political scene for the last several decades. Where we will head, I don't know. No crystal ball. But I think nationalism is on the rise. Isolationism is on the rise. Deglobalization is on the rise. All of these are potential causes of conflict, and just hopefully that does not lead to further military conflict or wars.